kind of always thought that IT would gobble us up. But actually what I see happening is IT is actually melting into us, and we're melting into them.
Here we go. One, two, three, boom, boom, boom. Hi, this is Stromquist. Welcome to Control Talk. Now your smart buildings videocast and podcast for the week ending May 20th. This is episode 267, folks, where we talk about all things smart controls with one of the smartest guys in the industry, the man, the myth, the legend, the one, the only, Kenny Smyers. Controls man from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Kenny Smyers, welcome to the show, big dog.
All right. Yeah, baby. I'm glad I'm here. It's a great show, and getting that gorgeous weather here, some motivated sunshine. Got a lot of good things going on. We've got a really interesting interview series coming up here. We talked offline about some of the great stuff, but our industry is in tremendous flux, good flux. We used to call it disruption, and that had a bad connotation, but now we're seeing things in a much different light because we're getting a lot more information, and that information means more. So instead of being afraid of the unknown, we're seeing some very definitive, directions being taken in our industry that are for the benefit of everyone at large. So it's a great industry to be in. Got some great people, and we'll meet a couple of them shortly. Got some great vendors that have done some great things this week. We have some great contractors that we'll recognize for the work they've done, and some great products. So it's just generally a good episode 267.
Episode 267. Well, listen, a couple of shout outs right away. Our friend Aaron Gorka, I think, got married yesterday from Ant Technologies. Aaron is our infield reporter, and he has been doing wedding stuff. So we'll get him back on the show in the next couple of weeks. But special shout out and congratulations to Aaron Gorka. And then I know you got some shout outs too, Kenny, but I want to give our control test committee an alert. There is a nasty, nasty, nasty virus going around, and I don't mean the kind that makes you sneeze and cough. One of my good customers today, I got an email from one of my customers, somebody I know, and it said DocuSign. It asked you to sign the document, right? And so I was on my phone. I tried to do it on my phone. Nothing happened on the phone. So I called this guy because it seemed kind of odd. Why would he send me something with DocuSign? He goes, "Oh my gosh, it's a Ukrainian thing. It's come out of the Ukraine. It basically it's insidious. It gets into your contact list, and it sends it out to all your other people." So I'm pretty sure they weren't able to get through with the iPhone. But if you see anything from me or anybody that says DocuSign and it doesn't make sense, call the person before you check it out and delete it immediately. This one of the major players here in Atlanta, very sharp group. I mean, they're having a really tough time with this, and it's escalating. So.
Well, I'm glad you gave me the heads up. It's the last thing anybody wants is something like that. We know that our friend Fred Gordy's at a cybersecurity presentation out there in California at one of the meetings there, and it's never going to go away. And the only way we can combat this is to have rapid dissemination warnings. Be very concerned about your email. Look for that lock up there on your web bar there, and make sure you got a secure line, and don't open things that don't belong to you. Just be very protective.
And sort of on a lighter note, Kenny, I had to go someplace to get my driver's license renewed, actually. And I drove in traffic to get up there. I get up there, and I was missing a piece, and it was bad traffic going both ways. So I had to turn around and come back. And when I got back to get the thing I needed to get my driver's license renewed, I said, okay, this would be a great opportunity to try, because I have a Tesla, the automated driving thing in the Tesla. So I went to YouTube, got the video, oh man, that's pretty easy to do. And so I've been using the autonomous pilot on it. It is so cool, Kenny. It really is. They got sensors all around the car. So it's actually safer, I think, because you basically, the way you engage it, you set cruise control, right? So that's one of the settings, and it'll and then there's a car length in front of you. You can adjust that, how many car lengths you are. So the car will automatically speed up or slow down, depending on how many car lengths you want to maintain. The other thing is really cool, if you want to change lanes, you click the blinker, and one of my big things has always been the blind spots you can't see. Well, this thing's got sensors, so it will not change. It'll automatically change lanes, but it will not change lanes if there's a car there, if it's unsafe. So I've been having a really, really good time getting people in the car and turning that on unbeknownst to them. And then, pulling a newspaper out or something, or my phone, and texting, and not even looking at the road and watching their reactions. It's kind of fun.
I can imagine, but so do you get the heebie-jeebies? Are you over it now? I mean,
oh, I'm over it now. I am
full
so
confidence
over it.
in
Yeah,
automated.
this thing drives better than I do. So,
well, there you go, people. They got
yeah, and the
verifiable testimony from a credible source.
Well, and the thing that they're doing now is the only thing that's not hooked up to is hooked up to like a GPS, right? And they're working on that. I saw an interview with Elon Musk. They're actually going to have a self-driving car go from Los Angeles to New York. There'll be a driver in the car, but he won't be doing anything other than sitting. He'll be a participant. Mm-hmm. And so they've been mapping in all the data, and it was kind of interesting because they were saying that, oh, so you just got one route you want to go, and they go, well, no, actually, by the time it's all said and done, there'll be multiple routes you can go, kind of like a Waves type thing where there's traffic in one route, this thing will go the other way. And Elon Musk is basically saying, hey, you want to be able to sit in the car and read the newspaper or take a nap or whatever. And they were asking, so well, what's your percentage? He goes, it's 99.9% safe. But you're not going to take a nap if there's that 0.1%. So they're working on that. But this guy's brilliant. I think whenever I get worried about the world, I just listen to him or Richard Branson. And I think the really smart people are not involved in politics. They're not involved in media. They're just quietly going about making the world a better place.
Oh dear, that's quite an endorsement, Eric.
Well, there you go. There you go. And speaking of endorsements, Kenny, let's just get right to our guest this week. How about introducing our guest, a kinder, gentler Crocodile Dundee Sinclair.
That's great. I like it. Our guest today is Mr. Ken St. Clair, the owner-editor of Automated Buildings. We're going to discuss primarily his May issue, which is entitled Humanistic Digital Inclusion. But Ken is, again, cutting edge, bringing us all to this understanding. What the digital inclusion is the ability of individuals and groups to access and use information and communication technologies. And accordingly, Ken's editorial said, we need to build digital inclusive communities for each of our buildings. And I think that's a pretty cool concept. And we had digital twin, now we have a digital community. So Ken, welcome to the show. And I just kicked the football on your side of the field. So go ahead, tell us what digital inclusion is.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a good topic. It's I think probably the biggest thing it's done is I've got people reading Automated Buildings who don't normally read Automated Buildings, and we've got the folks from the other side, the touchy-feely folks, as I like to call them. They're basically glad that we as technology people are recognizing that we have to deal with this, and there's actually a fair amount of movement. And I wrote another article, empathetic for empathetic buildings, because I'm speaking on that in the our seminar, or basically our event in Helsinki. So basically, I think the title is Empathetic, Healing, and Anticipatory Buildings. And when they threw me that topic, I got to admit, I was sort of had that sort of deer in the headlights look, as what am I going to talk about with that? And it's been an excellent way to put me on a new road. So we basically have been kicking around, and I've been pleasantly surprised that there's a lot of folks thinking this direction, and lots of good information coming down.
All right. Well, Ken, it's very interesting what you said, that there's the touchy-feely side, and then there's the technical, mechanical side, and it seems to me like this. I read a little bit about your upcoming meeting there in the European world, that they have a different approach towards things. They don't look at the building as being this clinical environment with bricks and glass or whatever, but more so like a nurturing area where you're supposed to go in and feel good and be productive and have an environmental tie to your environment. Like, in other words, it's difficult for me sometimes to get my head around being sensitive to just the environment. But I sure have. I've learned to recycle, and now we're taking this thing another step, that even the buildings we get into, that we should treat them with a different regard, instead of it being this thing that is a distant you leave it and it has nothing to do with your life, and you don't care how it's built or whatever, because you don't really have any kind of a association to it. And I think the Europeans have a much more kind of like kind of a more empathetic attitudes towards that if people really truly believe that they're working in an environmentally sound area, they're going to be happy to go there, and they're happy that everybody's contributing to make that building a better part of the world they live in. Where we don't.
Yeah. Okay. I think we can credit the Europeans for being early to market on basically humanizing the buildings. But I think the other move that's afoot is the millenniums and the next generations following them. They think quite different than us, and they're actually more concerned about how they feel and how they interact with the building than we were. I think we tended to come in a time when we just walked into the building. We were glad to be inside the building out of the rain, and basically we sat in our little box and we basically tried to do our job. The new generation questions everything, and rightly so. And what they're finding is to actually successfully bring those people into the building and have them successfully work. It's a whole different attitude, and they're not happy to sit in a cubicle and have us tell them that that's the correct temperature and the humidity's fine, and pat them on the head. That just doesn't work anymore. So we have to let them interact. We have to understand how they feel, and there's what I'm seeing is that's more of a global thing, as I pointed out in my last few articles. If you look what I'm linking to, we've got good articles from Australia, good articles from London, good articles from Sweden, Finland, and Canada as well. Some interesting health stuff out of Calgary, Canada. I couldn't believe that. I just ran into that, and it's been going on, and they've been doing a lot of work with ASHRAE, trying to work on numbers that are beyond sort of the empirical comfort numbers. So it's an interesting area, and I've been learning lots, and I'm hoping that exposing people to some of these articles and some of these different approaches is of use. I think in my article on the empathy, I talk about once you start down a new road, you kind of look at everything a little differently, and you meet new people alongside the road, and we're definitely heading down this new road, and it's a global road. I think you're quite right. In the past, that was something we looked to the Europeans to give us that touchy-feely look, but now we're starting to see American software companies, and inside of that too is there's an incredible transition that we all have to make, is we all have to start thinking like software developers, and we have to become agile. We talked about that before, but we have to try and understand what we're designing. We're designing user interfaces and user experience, and we need to think about those words and how best to do that.
Well, let me ask you a question, Ken. I think you're right on it with that. And my question for you is, are the construction processes different in Europe? And Kenny, you might know this too, versus over here, because over here, low cost drives everything. The way things are set up, it's not necessarily conducive to create, an integrated building like that.
Well, I think the general feeling of most is that the bulk of the market in humanizing buildings is probably existing buildings. And if your construction process is broken, which I believe it is, you will build those buildings, and then for someone to effectively use them, I think the humanistic values will be troweled on
to
top.
your point, Eric, the European standards aren't necessarily better or harder. I mean, some areas they're safety first, but they're very much enforced. Where our standards, we have good standards, and we actually have well designed. I don't think. I mean, to Ken's point, our construction process needs to be improved. I think it's by design dislocated to provide different business entities opportunities to participate very, very exclusively in these markets. And so we grew up being very comfortable. If you were in lighting and became the lighting, expert in your area, and you ran that lighting projects, and that was your inclusion. And we designed things to facilitate individual, successes business-wise versus building successes integration-wise. And now we're trying to redo that, and it's a very tough fight because people are so used to, engineers are used to putting sections in there that don't necessarily integrate well, and we're finally getting some successes where I think in Europe, and the gentleman that we introduced to the Hall of Fame, Mr. What's his name, Mr. Backnet?
Hans Kranz.
Yeah, but what do we call him? He's oh gosh, we had a nickname. He does up as the Backman. He's Backman.
Backman, yeah. Backman.
If you read his
Batman,
articles,
Backman.
Yeah, back 20 years ago, I mean, that was what they were into. They were into the integration, probably, and they enforced it. See, that was one of the things I learned when I was there, is if they tell you get in an accident and you have bald tires in Germany, and you got hit from behind at a red light, and then they do the inspections, the police come, and your car wasn't within standards. Guess what? You don't get covered by your insurance company because you shouldn't have been on the road. And it's a very tough approach, but it's very.
Yeah, but I think to your point, I mean, I think it's just the way our system's designed now. It's not necessarily maybe they don't enforce it as much, but I guess the question I would have is, at first I thought maybe the owners were going to drive it and insist that there had to be a better way, specifically on the new construction side. Now I'm wondering, Ken, if the millennials are just going to do it. They're going to walk in, and the building, I mean, it used to be a perk, I think, to have a well building or a building with all these amenities. Now I think it's going to be a necessity. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree. And it's becoming part of, the people you have to have the people wanting to come to your building. And the other thing is the building is changing completely in function too, is where we all used to go there 9 to 5, 5 days a week. Typical high-tech building today, we may show up once a month, or so it needs to be something they can be proud of, something that they're intrigued, they're interested to go into. It has to be something that interacts with them when they come in and welcomes them and makes them part of it. So there's a whole new side, and we have the technologies to do that. And we know when the people are in the building, where they are. We can geofence them, all of these things, all of these technologies. But we have to be careful how we use the technologies, that we don't insult the people, and we don't. We have to have empathy for the people and understand what they're doing and why they're doing, and in the fact that they're all different, so they in fact may want a different experience. So we're starting to dive into some of that, and it's early days for sure. But the fact that I think that so many folks have kind of looked at it. The other one that I love to point at is the auto industry, because they're going through exactly the same thing. they had these cars, and now they've become autonomous, and they've got to work on these interfaces, and they've got a tough sell because they've got to take away the power of driving the car or basically assist that. So they're very much into the user experience and how do we get the touchy-feely bit of the people, that's the relationship between them and their car, the pride and all the things that go along with that. The other thing that I think is a model that we need to model is, if you look at the auto industry, they basically are they're changing to pick up these ideas, but they're changing from being hard metal companies basically banging together tin cars, and they started to use robot welders and stuff like that. But now they're turning into giant software research companies, and basically are trying to figure out how best to keep the cars from running into each other, how best to turn on automatic braking. And so this whole experience that they're achieving between the driver and the other thing is they've even redefined the driver of the car. The driver of the car is no longer the driver of the car. He's just basically the occupant of the car.
Right.
So the occupant of the car, what kind of a user experience is he looking for?
Right, but to me, Ken, and I totally get that, and I think there's a lot to be learned for that. But to me, when I look at autos, I think we're going to see an increase in autos. I mean, I think they're going to keep going up. That's a growth market, right? And so now they're competing against each other to get market share. My question for both you guys is, with people working from home, with traffic and all the crazy stuff, do you see fewer and fewer people go? I mean, in other words, is that the commercial building space for office space, is that diminishing? In other words, is that a growth market still growing, or is that diminishing? And, part of it was, Kenny and I heard Jim Young speak, and I actually went and checked one of these things out. There are things like WeWork and all, where you basically can go in and you can lease space just when you need it, right? So, but with the people moving from home, do you see the building market growing, or do you see it, because it's a different thing than if it's diminishing?
I think what you have to do to make any sense of that is you have to look at the area. I think in areas there will be growth. In other areas there will be not much growth. What's happening, of course, is in the international market. We've had this situation that the people are moving, basically from the farms to the offices. We still got that going on, so they're still building space. And I'm not sure that their space is well founded on, on what on their requirements, but that's just my opinion. But I don't know. We have the ability to work. There's a whole social side of that, and so I think more the buildings may turn into more entertainment value than work.
Right.
It goes to be a place you basically will work by yourself remotely, and then you will come together for a meeting, and the team, the building of the team and the whole pulling the company together will be done in these buildings. So
right, and sort of bringing it back full circle, I think regardless, it's the building space is getting more and more competitive. And I think what, we said, a point we made earlier is it's an expectation now that the building is going to be smart and have the amenities for the people that are coming into the space. I think if you don't have that as a building owner, then, you're going to be left behind. Okay. And so I think that creates tremendous opportunity for the people that read your magazine and the people that listen to our podcast and video cast. I think if they sort of adopt and understand what's happening, they can really position themselves to take advantage. So I guess that would be the next question. Ken, if you're a manufacturer, or if you're a master systems integrator, even a distributor, how do you position yourself to participate in this shift that we're seeing?
Well, I'd like to throw 2 cents in on that evolving of the buildings. We've gone to the Realcomm, and we've heard different testimonies about, the impact autonomous cars are going to make in a city like Los Angeles, and the utilization of parking garages and the traffic, and pretty much make that go away. But I think what we see is like, like plate tectonics. As one area of the world solidifies, it gets hard. Another areas crash into two plates together, and we're seeing a change to the actual geography, the topography of the world's changing. We're seeing that in cities too. So I think that you're going to see reutilization of existing real estate, but that'll never go away and probably only increase in value because of proximity, because of the nearness to hospitals, schools. I mean, until we give up having children and having social interaction and having actual economic trade, it's not magic, and you can only do so much of that. With technology. I mean, there will always be a human interface until the end of humanity, and they have to be somewhere. And as we see the populations growing, very, very rapidly in certain areas, like Ken said. So certain urban areas, I mean, they're having opportunities to build new facilities using our late great technologies and all the stuff we're talking about, to include now the touchy-feely stuff. But where you have those old cities where they've got almost vacant real estate, like Pittsburgh. Our population was recently assessed at 300,000. Used to be close to 500,000, and the interior of the city has just been it's morphed into loft apartment areas. We have these really nice, interesting buildings, and then to the new corporations, we have a PNC building. I went down. It's one of the most green buildings in North America now. Uh, we claim to be the number one, but I'm sure you can't hold that place for long. But they seem to have brought as much of the outside into the inside. They're like sunlight in. They're bringing greenery in. They're making the place just like you can't even tell if you're in the lobby or you're outside in the plaza, because it's so outdoorsy. They've got water fountains. I mean, so I see a lot of creation. I see a lot of opportunity. As long as you're hitting on the main things: energy efficiency, sustainability. But the closer you are into the corporate centers of the world, where they have the PNC banks and the UPMC hospitals, you're going to have people live around there and sustain life around there. So you can have all the shopping centers and entertainment areas, and I think so. As long as you have the people are populated, those buildings are always going to be heavily transient, but used. I don't think you're going to see that ever disappear.
Right. Well, I think the other good thing is about all the technologies that we're all working with is they all are very portable. We're seeing way more use of wireless, and everyone has a cell phone. So for a retrofit of a very old, like a building of a couple of centuries ago, and of course a lot of that's going on in Europe, is that they basically, if they can get the wireless around the building through the big concrete walls and stuff like that, then the people will start moving back in, because they actually like those old buildings. They like the feel of them. They like the stature of them. There's a. I think the developer that's at danger is a developer that sort of was building, who had his only focus in life is to crank out a building at the lowest cost per square foot, because I think you're going to have a hard time getting people to move into a square tower that's it's got a thin floor plate and curtain wall and really no soul. It's just basically, why was it built that way? Because that's the way we could get the most square footage. So I think we're seeing a bit of a change in attitude there. I think they will see it in the fact that people won't move into their new buildings. They'll actually retrofit their old buildings, and they want to have more input into how that's done. So it's an interesting side, but it's the people are going to have more say in what happens to the buildings. I think that's the trend.
Right. Well, and Ken, so what I hear you saying is that retrofit's probably the sweet spot. New construction might not be changing very quickly, but retrofit is where people in our community can really play. Yeah,
and I think the other thing too is the way the new construction industry is we'll let them build we'll let them build and maybe try and control the shape of what they build, and then tell us how you can build that shape. And then it's like, are you guys done? And then once they're done, get them out of there and basically humanize the building, because they don't know much about humanizing, I don't think. Now, there's another big movement that a lot of architectural people are getting into this, and getting into the digital movement, and starting to see that digital's like a fabric that they can trowel over the building, and they can completely change the building. And of course, those strong folks, and there's some lead buildings, not not LEED as an LEED, but LEED buildings that are leading the industry in all kinds of countries. It's also very global. Everybody's looking at everybody's building to see who's got the best ideas.
Well, Ken, let me ask you a question, because we're talking about humanizing a building. And, I know a lot of our community is probably going to go, okay, that sounds cool, but what exactly does that mean? Could you give some examples that a master systems integrator could have a conversation, or a vendor could be thinking about their products? How do you humanize a building?
Well, I think the title of this issue we got online right now, of course, is Humanistic Digital Inclusion. And I think that's the other thing that kind of dawned on me when I was reading all of this stuff is that's really what it's about. Is everybody needs to feel digitally included, and we have the capabilities of doing that. And so they get to put input into not only the temperatures and the obvious things, but they should get to the amount of daylight. This daylighting is becoming huge, and the fact that we can control lighting now with circadian cycle and then all of that, that's huge. So they're getting more parameters that they can actually control, and it's economical to control these, which it wasn't in the past, but it is now. And again, so that's probably a good thing to talk about new construction and retrofit is we're getting to the point, I think, in some of the stuff. If you say what's the cheapest way to light this building, they basically string the power out. Although, of course, what's happening there is even the power systems are changing. There's a lot of moving pieces here for sure. That's an interesting one, of course, because we're going from high voltage lighting to low voltage lighting, and so now we're running 24 volts around the grids, and basically, so we're getting out of those high. So all of a sudden, the guy says, well, the easiest way to do this is to put in high voltage switching and don't switch the lights off ever. And that's the lowest cost. And then it's like, are you sure? Do you know how much it costs to put that high voltage system in? If we put in low voltage systems, they're a fraction of that cost. But he's in the high voltage business, so he's never going to give you that answer. So there's a whole bunch of problems there.
Right. But I think, getting back to this digital inclusion, which I think is a great concept. I think probably the one that comes to mind right off the bat, and the now defunct Comfy, which Kenny Smyers, why don't you tell our audience about what Comfy was? But would that be what you would consider a digital inclusion sort of process?
I was picking up on the words now defunct. I hadn't heard that they're completely closed down, or just.
Well, maybe they haven't. I thought they had. Well, when Lindsay Baker left, I thought it was all over. But
no,
that's because we're big fans of Lindsay Baker.
Well, there was three people that they lost. They lost their CEO, they lost Lindsay Baker, and they lost one of their prime salespeople that we'd known from. He'd called on us and various things. But the Comfy is still in business.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, but Kenny Smyers, just for our audience who might not know what Comfy is, and because I think it's a good, if Kenny Sinclair, if you agree, it's a good. They would have been one of the pioneers, I would think, and I think possibly what some of their problems were is basically probably funding. Obviously, was one of the main ones, but the secondary one is that the scope of what they were looking at was they started with temperature, but already they were starting to get competition from the lighting people who were having a greater impact than temperature. People probably care more about their lighting than they do their temperature. And the bigger thing that's coming out of some of this humanistic digital inclusion and some of the stuff that Brad wrote about thermal delight, that people actually don't really care what the temperature is. If they're either hot, they want to be cooled, and if they're cold, they want to be heated. And they'll accept an incredible tolerance in temperature, much greater than we would ever give them, if they have control over it. So right. It's right. And for our audience who might not know, Comfy was basically an app that went on your smartphone, and you basically, if you were too hot, you could hit I'm too hot. If you're too cold, you could hit I'm too cool, and then it would change the system. And to Ken's point, what they found out was by giving people the power, they had a much higher tolerances, so they actually saved energy. It was kind of sort of counterintuitive, because you would think if you give people the power, they would be running the cooling or the heating all the time, and it was sort of had a different, exact opposite effect.
Plus, it also had more accurate zoning, so the people were actually in the zones that were active. And yeah, well, I'm not sure how to say I think what they did was pioneer work. To Ken's point with lighting, we just had a meeting yesterday where we saw the impact of lighting. It finally took first place in the meeting that, the circadian rhythm's critical and patient care now, but also in schools that you're seeing specs saying that you've got to have 8 scenarios of lighting, that 10 o'clock in the morning, they want this light, right before lunch, when everybody's impatient, they want this light, after lunch, everybody's lethargic, they want this light. And if you don't have a product and you're not following that pursuit of what they consider to be important aspects that lead to productivity and better student behavior and better student outcomes, we're seeing the world change right in front of us, instant by instant. So it's kind of, I love it. And Comfy, I think, did a lot of pioneer work, so I give them credit. They really did, and they were supported for a while. They lost some of their funding, I think, but these things have time limits. If you can't get the vehicle across the bridge by a certain period of time, then the company that's financing you has the right to find another navigator.
Okay, and I think the lighting is a great example of the digital inclusion. I mean, that's exactly it. Is the people, they've done studies, and the people want this kind of result, and now they're including the people and their wishes. The only thing that they need inside of that is some method of validating comfort and satisfaction. So a fact that they all tweet, yes, I'm comfortable, yes, I'm enjoying this changing of light that you're doing. And you're basically, because then you have to have empathy for the people. I mean, that's sort of research numbers, but now we need to have the feedback of the people. How did you like these research numbers? And I think the general feeling is it's better, but for me, I don't want it doing that at 3 o'clock. So so we'll stop doing that at 3 o'clock.
Well,
that's digital inclusion, is basically we're now, and we have the technology to do that. So we now can reach out to the people, and they have a voice. They are part of the building. It's their building. The other thing that we failed badly on, it's just hit me, is our user interfaces. When we talk about user interfaces, we talk about our graphic interfaces and our man-machine interfaces and stuff like that. They're all aimed at the building owner, the building operator, possibly the building engineer or the design engineer to a lesser extent, but none of them reach back to the buildings. And as I mentioned in this building, and the title of our June issue is going to be Building an Awesome EX. And of course, what EX in the software world is the user, UX is user experience. And I think that's the attitude change we all have to do. Is what we're really doing is we're building these buildings for a user experience, and how we basically communicate that to them. We have to have a better software interface. We have to have better user interfaces. And then the first thing we have to acknowledge is that the user interface is the people in the building, not the people operating the building, nor the people owning the building. They're not important. The basics, the people who actually use that building, the actual users. And to that extent, long before automated buildings, I was working as a consultant, and we redefined our energy management control systems to client comfort systems. And we basically wrote a manual for that. And that was like 25 years ago. And then we started automated buildings. One of the first things we did with automated buildings is we talked about how each building would become a .com address, because it was the days of .com. All of these things were early indicators that change was coming, but here we are 20 years later, and even both of those concepts have not been really accepted. It's people don't call the DDC system a client comfort system.
Well, the thing, Ken, too, is, I mean, again, whoever has the money normally drives the train. And, you know, and so I remember we talked about placebo thermostats. I remember the fight that we had when we couldn't do the offset, you know, put a placebo value in there or put the maximum minimum stops. So we had to put hard stops, literally plastic, you know, stoppage, so that you couldn't turn the thermostat setting past, you know, 74 and not, you know, below 66, you know. So we had physical, you know, you'd order the covers that prevented it. But I think what happened was that, to your point about millenniums and everything, everybody expected people to be energy gluttons and to be careless and sloppy if they had control of their temperature or their lightings. You know, we still see lighting being, you know, kind of light litter has never abated one iota, but internally the people are not gluttons. People are very careful to be good Samaritans inside of a building if you give them a chance. So I think, but your point about digital, the technology that accelerated, now you can be digitally inclusive because probably 95 or 90 greater percentage has a smart device that will link them in with the building automation and allow them to be digitally included, which the user would never provide that, or not the user, the owner would never provide that kind of an inclusion because they would never pay for the interface. But now that you come to work, bring your own device interface, that is a new opportunity that really just simply didn't exist. So now you can harness that and harvest all this technology that people are bringing with you. And we're seeing these synergies coming together where if you have this, we can come in with that. So I think the acceleration, but you're right about it's still not where it needs to be really, really successful. It has the pioneer work, and to your credit, you did that occupancy comfort thing. I remember going to very tough seminars where people would argue over about, you know, if you don't put in this, you know, the lock in the software, in other words, they could set the hardware point wherever they want it, but man, we better be able to control all those set points on our front end, because we know that these teachers and these occupants are going to leave the classroom, forget the lights are on because they have to get home to their family or something, that they don't go back and check the thermostat setting. And then the maintenance guy, he gets about half the classroom. So we actually had, you know, a lot of hard concrete information that people generally would be wasteful out of forgetfulness, not out of a desire to be wasteful, but, you know, just human tendency is that you don't go back or you forget. So now that we're digitally included, I think you're right. We should see a greater acceptance and acceleration of the ways to link that person's desire to, number one, be comfortable and be happy and be in that building, but two, give them a chance to be part of the system's accuracy, the sensor information, the location information, and the comfort level. You know, so if you got, you know, you got 10 people on this side of the building are in the sunlight and they don't dim the, you know, they have no way to prevent the heat load from coming in. They want cooling. But the other side of the building, that the doctor's office, where they've got somebody in the, you know, patient room that's trying to, you know, go through, you know, change of clothes or whatever, they want warmth, you know. So it's still challenging because equipment and design of buildings don't facilitate the multi-tenant, you know, aspects. You know, it's just, so a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, but Kenny, the other thing I'm wondering about, there's going to be an unintended consequence where you're going to have a digital moderator, because, you know, we're going to get, because I have no doubt that we'll get to the point where everybody's going to get to have a say so, but Kenny wants the lights pink and Ken wants them green and I want them blue. You know, are you going to create a dissension with that? You know, I mean, I've got two small kids. When you have one kid, it's kind of easy. You get two, and, you know, they start arguing because they want different things. So maybe something to talk about down in the future. But Ken, I think we're going to find out that when we look back, when the history books are written, you're going to be, you know, with this humanistic thing, you're going to be the Sigmund Freud of building automation control. And
I agree.
And to that point, you're going to be a guest on a podcast here pretty soon. And you were telling me a little about this and digital mindfulness. So tell our audience what digital mindfulness is and about the podcast you're going to be on.
Well, I'm looking forward to finding out more what digital mindfulness is in Helsinki, as Lawrence is speaking there. But it's basically, in my simple terms, it's just, there's this whole feeling side. We have all these digital technologies and we can do almost anything. And we get excited about the things we can do with them. And I think all of us, the three of us, have experienced that in our homes, is because we can do stuff, we can do it. But that doesn't mean that it's accepted or liked, or that we actually end up doing it because it gets changed because of a higher power. So I think that is part of digital mindfulness, is that the people, what the people want and how the people think, how the people feel, is ultimately is going to sky by your technical system. So you basically have to do that. That's one side of it. The other side of it is that this digital thing can be very addicting. It can drive you, because you can gather more information, and you keep on going until you sort of, you know, basically come to a point that you have human overload. So I think digital mindfulness is just about how much should we back away from some of that.
Well,
How,
I think you're right about that. And I think we might have somebody who can provide some answers. It looks like our good friend who wrote Zen in the Art of the Digital Building, Therese Sullivan, I think, is with us. Therese, are you with us?
I am with you.
There we go.
I can hear you guys.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Well, Therese is on her phone. You're at a conference. Tell us our audience where you're at, Therese.
I am in the press room of the IoT World Conference in Santa Clara, California.
Nice. And are you guys talking about digital mindfulness down there yet?
You know, it's interesting. It's there's so many tracks. This is the second year that I've gone to this conference, and it is the second day. But there's probably a session on everything that you could want related to IoT. But as a result, it's a little bit diluted. I think people, so many of these areas cross over, and it's kind of interesting, just the level of interest this year compared to last in the IoT. It's, I would say, on a downward slope.
Oh, interesting. Downward. Say more about that. Downward
Well,
slope like meaning it's picking momentum up, or downward slope like people are losing interest in it?
I think the general speaking about IoT, people are finding it too nebulous.
Okay. All right.
And they don't know how to get their footing. And so this year compared to last, it's like night and day.
actually, that's interesting, Therese. Working with the Helsinki conference, the Nordic Smart Building Conference, I'm kind of getting that same thing. Is there's a downplay of IoT. We want to, we want to achieve, humanistic digital inclusion. That's what we were talking about before you came in, and we want to achieve that. There's actually very little talking about the technologies. It's more, what is the touch and feel? How will we walk away from it? How will we make the building better?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pleased with the track that I'm on, which is the smart building track. This morning I've heard it was great. A smart building panel session led by Harbor Research, Alex Glazer, with our good friend Fred Gordy,
Nice.
representing intelligent buildings. His client, Kilroy Realty, which is a big institutional property management from here on the West Coast, from San Jose to San Francisco. Kilroy owns a lot of buildings, and she was on the panel. Fred was on the panel. Campus overseer of all data for Arizona State University was a third member of that panel, and a fourth from a new company called Crate.io, which looks to be a consultancy on data. But Fred always does a great job, especially on the security aspects. I was not disappointed at all in the smart buildings track, but just in general, all the other, there's just maybe too diluted. That smart cities is another track, energy and grid is another track, data architecture is another track. There's probably 12 tracks going, and so each room does not have very many people in it.
How big a conference is it?
Well, you know, they rented the entire Santa Clara Convention Center. I don't know the numbers compared to last year. but
But
and
they're looking like
maybe
a
it's
couple
a
of
second.
thousand people, or
Yeah, I'd have to look at the numbers after. I'm not very good at like looking around and estimating, but should
yeah,
have been a couple thousand.
yeah, I would have thought.
But maybe they're just also spread out.
Well, I think
Um,
that's the other problem is there's just so much going on, so many sessions, and
Yeah, and if Ken Sinclair and well, Teresa, you're there, so that gives it validity right there. And Ken's going off to Helsinki, but Teresa, we've been talking with Ken a little bit about the May issue, and you wrote a really, really nice column in the May issue summarizing the Niagara Summit 2018, and we actually had you on it for an interview, so we sort of talked about that. But I would be very interested in sort of getting your opinions on humanizing buildings, and what do you sort of see going on with that?
I'm this afternoon. I'm going to go to that track. I think that the property managers, I'm going to call them the institutional property managers, are very interested in I'm going to call it the WeWork model, but that idea of hoteling people, that people can just, if they're not happy with their space, they can go and the leases are so short, week to week, month to month, that they can go somewhere else. So there's more pressure on people that own that space to make it comfortable for people. That was another I really enjoyed. And for me, it's a little bit of a refresh, but it always bears repeating. CBRE spoke as an institutional property manager, talking about efficiency as a service. And I think that's also kind of comfort as a service. I think the two things come together. And
So,
yes, it's kind of. So I'm actually missing one of those. Well, it'll be at 3:00. So we're not even at 2:00 yet.
what's the title of it?
Well, yeah, I was going to show you some of these titles.
Well, you can't really do it, Trace, because you're not on video.
So 240, Connecting the Future of Office Buildings, Green Buildings, and Co-working Spaces, and that's led by Microsoft. Somebody, Bert Van Hoof, I think that should be interesting. And 3:00, Enhancing the Workplace with IoT, from managing buildings to managing the user experience. That should ring some bells for Ken.
Yeah.
And that's going to be Cushman and Wakefield. So, as I said, CRE, Cushman Wakefield, they're populating this one track among, it looks like 12 tracks at this IoT conference.
Actually, you've just answered another question that Eric was asking earlier. Is what's going to drive this change? And just hearing you say those words with like WeWork, and it's these new companies. It's basically the customers that are buying buying floor space these days are much different than the old customers. I mean, they used to all work for an oil company or an insurance company or a coal company or something like that, and now they basically work for a virtual software company. So when they come and they start asking you questions about your building, they're asking completely different questions because they know how their whole culture is built on that, and their culture has been built, most of these companies, in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And so they're not small companies. WeWork or my daughter just started working for Shopify and has been there for 3, 4 months and has yet to meet a real person. Basically was interviewed online, hired online, sent a laptop in a box and a monitor, and has been working for 3 or 4 months without, she has lots of Zoom people, but she doesn't actually have much flesh and touch. And they are going to a facility in Vancouver to all get together. And the question comes is what they almost need more is the hoteling. They almost need to go to a very nice hotel or a very nice resort and then all meet each other and have interaction and have a little holiday for all the good work they did and something to look forward to. So it's a whole different culture. It's
It's a huge
moving
change.
party culture.
You know, Ken, I think it's a great point. I think, you know, the one thing I think we're all agreeing upon is how buildings are going to be done and how people are going to use buildings is changing. Again, the question I keep coming back to for all three of you is how does the control trends community participate in it? Because basically we got, you know, contractors, we've got manufacturers. Do you see there being a play for them there? Ken, I keep hearing you say it's the software people, or are we just going to be bypassed by that and still putting the VAV controls in and maybe the lighting controls in?
Well, I think it, generally speaking, controls always begat controls, right? So if somebody writes a software program, they're probably going to want to control things closer. We talked about controlling the color of the light and the circadic cycle. You know, that's all going to require more points, more individual control. I guess the problem is for the conventional control people is that sometimes it's the control is moving closer to the device and is starting to come as an integral part of the device. So that's possibly a downside. I think the biggest thing is just for them to be educated and understand the changes that are coming. And I think the opportunities will overwhelm them as to how much control is actually going to be involved. If we can start doing this, you know, the $300, $300, sorry, me, the
330, 300.
Yeah, 330, 300. If we start working on that 300 piece, which we will be very quickly with humanistic digital inclusion, then all of a sudden there's going to be an awful lot more done. And also this whole retrofit thing of going back and taking these perfectly good buildings that really just need to have a soul put in them and basically have a way that the people can interact with them and digitally, then I think that's going to change the market.
I was going to answer your question, channeling Fred Gordy again. I was taking a lot of notes, and in terms of involving the controls contractors, in response to the question, how is this going to scale? How is in effect, how is smart building ever going to scale? And Fred gave the answer that when you are purchasing a building, Intelligent Buildings now has a practice where they're helping buyers assess what is connected, what are the systems that are connected, and how is that impacting their building network and their enterprise network. And when you're purchasing a system, again, the institutional buyers have not really gotten down to the question of what is the control system in there. And Fred and NIB are getting in there to remind them to do that and to take that inventory, and that sometimes they're not going to be that comfortable. Then they should bring the systems in. So you might get a short answer. Oh, we've got Johnson in here. We've got Schneider here. We've got this. They're usually at the buying when you've got so many other concerns. You're not going to go into that deeply. But that's IB saying you should, and they help buyers do that, bring those people to the table, look again at their what they use the acronym SLA, service level agreement, for all those vendors, everything that's connected to the system, and you might have to rewrite some of those agreements, and that would be the moment for controls contractors to get in there and prove that they have more to bring to the table.
Right. Therese, I think you're answering the question we had early on before you got on the call, which is how is it going to be driven? And Ken alluded to it too. The fact that the real estate people are out there and talking about this, it's on their radar, so it's going to trickle down. So I think, you know, being prepared, like Ken Sinclair said, being prepared and understanding that this is coming and being versed in it. So when they say, hey, we want, you know, digital inclusion, you don't look at them with a blank stare.
Yeah. The other thing, Kenneth made an observation earlier about this, where we have a bad zoning situation, and you know, sort of no amount of control in the world can fix it. I think what's going to happen is those bad control situations will get escalated to a level that they'll actually get repaired,
Oh,
because
good point.
they'll say that we got these people and they will not tolerate that situation, so we're going to have to fix that situation. So there's a big play, I think, for the existing folks. I think, generally they'll be busy. It was like when we put in DDC systems. That's what the old pneumatic guys said, that they'd be out of business, and they were never out of business. They ran off their feet trying to fix everything that would have been broken for 20 years, because now we could digitally prove that it was broken, and you get out there and fix it. So it'd be the same kind of a thing. I think it's just be a whole bunch of work just trying to make these buildings work the way they always should have, and we'll have new money to make that happen.
Yeah, here in Silicon Valley, it was actually from CBRE, David Frost, that was talking this morning, saying that there are still so many pneumatic controls in these buildings, and these buildings are changing hands regularly. People are buying them for investment. They don't get down to asking that question of what's the control system, and when they do get in, because they bought it as to make money as their cash cow, not to invest in it, they find that the landlords love, and I'm reading my notes again, so it's quotes from CBRE, landlords love to value engineer things out. And controls packages are often something that gets value engineered out. It's presented as a zero-sum game where you're not going to get all your conference rooms if you insist on changing the controls, and then they say, well, we'll just have to stick to pneumatics. They don't understand it. They can't see it. So they say, God, give us 2 more conference rooms in this space. We'll be able to attract different kinds of tenants to that, keep the old pneumatic controls. Hence, Silicon Valley is still filled with buildings that are running on pneumatic controls.
All you guys and Therese, is do you see artificial intelligence being involved in this, and if so, how?
Eventually, the only from last year, the only cloud vendor I see in a big way on the floor is Google, and I did sit down and look at the Google Cloud presentation. And they, of course, were talking about collecting training data for machine learning through their sensors. It's just a few years off.
Well, and I understand you've got Elon Musk is here. We know that. And why is Elon so against artificial intelligence?
Well, I think it's been taking us in the wrong direction. I don't know about Elon, if I could speak from him. Actually, even Henry Kissinger, I was reading the New Yorker, even Henry Kissinger has this article that is like, scared of artificial intelligence article. But I look at the world of marketing, I look at our world of awareness and what Twitter's done, and the other social media platforms. And in many ways, it's taken us backwards. It's taken us forward and it's taken us backwards. You can't do thought leadership very easily when you're chasing clicks and you're trying to figure out how to, if you want the most clicks, you use the words that people used yesterday. You don't use the words that people are going to use tomorrow, because you can get 10,000 clicks with using the popular word and your new word. So in general, it takes
real quick.
It takes conversation backwards.
Right. Well, I agree with you, and I think what it does is it gives people a false sense of what's real. That's a great point. I never heard anybody say that, but you're so right. So if you're really trying to figure out what's going on, that's probably not a very valid data set. It's a data point, but it does not complete the picture.
No. The wisdom of the crowd. In fact, another, like, I sound all erudite now, because I also listened to a thing about
it's a great show, by the way.
Shakespeare and Julius Caesar, that play, and how, even though he was written in the Roman times, so this is true in the Roman times, crowds are not the sensible people. Crowds do not give you wisdom. I mean, you had and Shakespeare was capturing the fall of the Republic, and why in that situation, the people could be led. In this case, people being led by who? Mark Antony. That right now, so that, and then they just put on that play in York. So everyone's been putting on Julia because they think it has something to do with the times we're living right now, and people still aren't getting the right message. This whole idea of search and platforms, and even AI is based on it too. It's the collect all the data and wisdom will come from that data. Lots of times it doesn't. It takes us backwards. So it's potential to take us forward, but it's also got potential to take us backward.
Yeah, and who's going to admit that's selling the data in such a way that we could use it better? That's a great point. And Ken, that gets sort of back to this whole. I mean, it's got to be a factor in this whole digital inclusion thing, right? Because
yeah, well, I'd like to take answer that question too. Then where I see this AI going is somebody described it as, AI is the brains and IO is the body, and so we're getting fairly familiar now with what the potential of what the body can do. I think we know very little about what the brain can do, the artificial brain, AI. I always dislike the word AI. I always take it back to self-learning. And what I see is that these new powerful edge devices are going to go out and they're going to have little thoughts. I don't know, everybody else sees AI with big thoughts from a central control, but I see AI will creep in from the edge, and how it'll work is basically these little smart new devices, powerful smart devices, will learn with self-learning algorithms like Google's new one, which we just tweeted today. That's how they'll learn, and Microsoft is doing a lot of work in that area as well. They will learn, but they will do simple things. They will do simple things as to when to turn the lights on, when to do the window shading, and so the intelligence will be pushed out to almost a room basis, basically to an occupant basis, to the digital inclusion of a person and their little problem. And I think that's where the value will come from AI, is having somebody, having my own personal assistant looking after me, giving me the things I want, and probably not having all that much effect on the main building. So maybe kind of thinking about it that way is stop thinking about this giant brain that controls the whole building. That's never going to happen, and it would be detrimental if it did. But a whole bunch of little thoughts where it could actually learn and start to digitally include the person on the edge.
Well, I think you're dead nuts right, Ken. I think that is the proper use of artificial intelligence. I think what Elon Musk is concerned about is that, once it learns empathy and to be able to reason beyond just the simple tasks, that's when we might have a problem. And I think this whole deal, Therese, you correct me if I'm wrong, is we just need to regulate it now, because it could get out of hand real quick at the rate that it's changing.
I think we have to think about it now, which is good.
Yeah,
it's good. I think some of the enthusiasm.
Let your mind wander on artificial intelligence soldiers.
And Shakespeare.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, about Shakespeare, but the whole idea is these things, they were programmed to kill, and so what do? One of them kills us. Do we put it away for life, or how do we envision social repercussions on AI? Also, the other thing is does that also potentially, you've got this army of AI soldiers, or somebody cuts into it and they turn it around and now it's chasing you. So there's a lot of interesting things there that I think that's the concern. One of the concerns of not having any control on AI.
I just started watching Westworld. Has anybody else watched Westworld yet?
Yeah.
And there was the line, "Oh, this world means one thing to the people that pay to go there. It means another thing to the shareholders, and it means another thing to the people that are managing it." And I thought about that quote, and I'm like, it's the same thing about buildings.
Oh my God! No, but it's so interesting because there was a thing now. There's a big thing going around now, and this it sort of wigged me out because a place I was at today they did it where you they say one word, it's the same word, and some people will hear it as Laura, and some people will hear it as Oompa or something like that. It's exactly the same word, but are depending on whether you hear higher frequencies or lower frequencies better, you will get a different. Have you guys heard this yet? You will. It's all over Twitter,
No,
social media now.
the colors, I seem to be looking.
I think it's called Yanni. Yanni was music,
That's
like
it.
elevator music.
No, but it was like Yanni or Laura is what it was. Ken's got it. Kenny Smyers has got it. But the point being that I mean, you can have one word that can be played, and 50% of the people will hear a different word than the other people. So but it gets back to, I digress. Okay. I tell you what, guys, we've been talking for a while. It's been an awesome conversation. Therese, what are you up to next, and how do people get a hold of you?
So right now I am putting the finishing touches on the next Haystack Connections magazine, and I'm very proud of it. Got some good stories in there. It's really kept my head down because I'll be running to the finish line. We're trying to get it out before IBCon in June. And so that will hopefully be the next place I'm at,
Nice.
and then I'll see you guys at.
Ken Sinclair, man, Therese and Kenny and I are in Las Vegas at Realcomm IBCon. You're going to be on the other part of the world. Tell us what you're going to be doing there and what's up next for you.
Okay, on the same days as IBCon Realcomm, the Nordic Smart Building Conference in Helsinki is there, and I've been invited to be a part of that, and they've given me actually a fair amount of involvement in the programs. More than I imagined. I was going to learn, and somehow I became part of the program. But that's kind of fun too, because it's helped me learn a lot. Actually, I'm very pleased, Therese, to hear that Haystack will be ready, because if it's ready for IBCon, that means it'll be ready for Nordic Smart Building as well. And I've been trying to create some interest in that area too. I wrote an article for them on their blog, Want It Virtually Visible? Tag it. And
Nice.
it basically talks about the value of Haystack. I believe Haystack was probably one of the first humanistic digital inclusions. The fact that we said that all devices shall use common words and shall speak a common language, and basically somehow humanizing that, because before it used to be IO6. Now it's got a name that has some reason to it, and I think that's the first edge of trying to take raw technology and humanize it. So
Gentler, kinder point.
yeah, we're taking it. We're going to, now that that's happened, we're now able to move on to some of the finer points and how we feel and how we react, and the visual side of it, and how we're going to put the lighting together, and
Sure.
and how that, then there's the health side of it. How do we feel about this? We're even talking about healing. With wearables, we actually have the ability to know how people are physically feeling, whether they're hot and cold and all that kind of stuff too. So yeah, just a lot of myriads of stuff going. I really like of let's just talking about IT for the purpose of talking about IT. I think they've kind of all moved on now, and they want to talk about how they're going to use IT. How is it going to become part of the user experience?
Well, I tell you what, I think real quick.
I was going to just, very quickly, is that Haystack, like when you look at it, I was listening to CBRE. He mentioned Brian Oswald. which of course Brian Oswald contributed one of the first dictionary sets to Haystack. Next you had Fred Gordy and Intelligent Buildings, and though he's not bringing up Haystack because it's more in the belly of the beast, that's what he's touting is all Haystack. If you understand the thread of how important Haystack has been to this world, the people on the podium, even in a show like this, are actually haystackers.
Well, there you go, folks. Therese Sullivan, you can find her at buildingcontext.me. Definitely check her out. Also look for that Haystack magazine to come out. It is a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. And also sign up for Haystack. If you're not part of that community, I don't think it costs anything, and they'll keep you in the loop. Ken Sinclair, Notre Dame, the Kinder General, Crocodile Dundee, Sigmund Freud Sinclair. We're going to have more nicknames for him than anything else. He's going to go in the Control Trends Hall of Fame as the Control Trends community member that has the most nicknames. You can find him at automatedbuildings.com. That's where all the smart people go to get educated. And he lets Kenny and I go to his site too. So we appreciate that. So guys, thanks so much for your time.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Thanks,
Thank you. I'll get back to my conference.
Okay, Kenny, man, it was good stuff from Therese and Ken Sinclair. But hey, we had some posts this week. We probably won't cover them all because we ran a little over with Ken and Therese. But Kenny, how about hitting on some of them for me?
Well, sure. We got the quick press on. We've got Innovate One Force here. It's a post from Simeon where they're doing. They have content that's kind of relevant to our Control Trends, world and our Control Trends community. But it's their latest edition, magazine number 14. So get the post on that. And then Scott Hamilton, Distech's new Vice President of Sales, is excited about the passion behind the people, behind the product. So it's a great interview at the Summit, Niagara Summit. We got a chance to sit down with Scott Hamilton in his new position.
I like Scott Hamilton, man. He's just one of those guys. You know how you get these guys, even though we compete with Distech, I mean, he's just a guy you like. He was great at Siemens. He, you can see it in the video. And I mean, that's why I encourage, because I think at the end of the day, one of the things that Control Trends does is it really gives people the ability to be found, right? And so, I think we all resonate with some people are going to like people and not like other people.
Right.
But a guy like Scott Hamilton, I would say you'd have a hard time finding anybody that wouldn't like him. He's a nice guy.
Work for him too. Work hard for him too. So I mean, that's the key too. I remember when I was in the military, the difference between a commander was night and day. You'd have a commander you'd love, and you'd follow him to the end of the earth or her, and then you'd get the replacement, and it was like, oh dear, it's going to be a rough couple of years until we get out of here. So, but the thing about Scott was his enthusiasm, and his background. He's got an immense background for how young he is. He's been through lighting, through the voltages, the high, low voltage, the stuff that's very challenging from an industrial automation standpoint. And then buildings. So now, but what I liked about it was that he really, he was excited. He believed that the unified lighting package, the unified, front end that, that Distech now offers for, integration of lighting and HVAC is a game changer because it creates a sensory network, which we've talked about. And for, and it leads to exactly what we want, increased productivity and just optimal energy efficiency. So it's just, it was a great post.
Anything else you want to talk about? What else we have up was interesting?
Well, we had one more. We had, and probably this is the showstopper of the week. We're still buzzing over this.
Big announcement. Drum roll, please.
Yeah, let's hear it. Siemens invests in J2 Innovations future, and this was, it really wasn't a great surprise. It was a pleasant surprise because we all rooted for J2. They came from, my gosh, I started from humble origins, hard work. They invested carefully. They worked hard, established some great international links with Romania, had a brain trust that just kept delivering. They made FinStack work, and they were training groups of people. Their trainer won Trainer of the Year, Gerard. And then now, boom, you got Siemens, one of the largest, most recognized brands in the world that, have put a stake in a very positive direction for future. I mean, this is nothing but good because as we talked about, the Haystack tagging is going to be the future in our world. And we've seen it close down. Like Ken Sinclair, in 7 years, we've seen the world change from what is it to let's get it in. Why don't we have it yet? So we're going to see that really emerge. And so congratulations.
Yeah, to both J2 and to Siemens.
Well, to Jason Briggs and to Scott Mensch and that team out there. And again, to Siemens, hats off.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, Big Dog. Well, listen, we had a couple other posts up, but you can check those out on the site. We really appreciate you tuning in. I'm Eric Stromquist. He's Ken Smyers, the man, the myth, the legend. Hope you guys have a great week. Remember, be bold, stay in control, stay relevant.
Indeed, Eric.
Indeed, Kenny Smyers.
Wow.